Well, super. Well, welcome to those of you who are just joining now. We've got a full house, and we've got a very ambitious webinar set aside for today on how to get a job in Norway without a resume or a network. Now, I want to make sure that you are in the right place for the next 60 minutes because this is a lot to cover, and I don't want to waste your time. And so you'll know this presentation is for you if you can relate to the following points. If you're frustrated with the results of searching on Finn, and at Nav, and any other job board you want to use here in Norway, if you're just frustrated with using online job boards, then you're in the right place. If you find that you just can't get your foot in the door for an interview, in other words, you've been trying, you've been sending in application after application, and you just can't seem to get in the door, then this is the right place. And if you feel like you've reached a dead end in your job search, in other words, I went on for almost a year without any luck, and before I was open-minded enough to try a different job hunting approach. And once I did that, then a whole world of opportunity opened up. And if you have reached that dead end, then you are perfect for this webinar because then you're going to be open-minded to applying this methodology to your own job search. So my goals for today are on this webinar are threefold. First of all, I want to share a methodology with you, one that was given to me by a professor here in Norway. But I wasn't smart enough to pay attention to a professor when he first gave me the advice. I had to hit the wall before I listened to him. And when I went back to him and told him the impact that this method had in my life, I said, what can I do to repay you? And he says, just keep passing it along. So this is my opportunity to pass on this method. I teach this at BI. I've been at Høyskole in Oslo at Kristiania Høyskole. I do this for executives as well. But I primarily, believe it or not, sit here in Norway and help career or job seekers in the U.S. with this method. So, excuse me, that's where my background is in teaching this. And so if you've got any questions along the way, feel free to ask me. Again, there is no, as people are asking, is this a multi-level marketing scheme? This is not. There is no promotion. There's no advertisement. And there are no products for sale. So I am just sharing with you a method. I figure this is my way to pay it forward. Thanks to that professor who was nice enough to share this method with me many, many years ago. I also want to inspire you with hope. It's pretty clear that most of you are frustrated with where you are in your job search. So I'm hoping that I can give you a new sense of hope with living here in Norway and finding a job opportunity that matches your skill strengths. And thirdly, I want to equip you to take action, right? If you just come through this webinar and you just say, oh, this was a really nice hour, it was insightful, but you don't take action, then you won't get any benefit from this next hour. So I want to make sure that you've got the equipment here necessary to take action and start looking for work tomorrow. All right, a little bit about myself because, my parents always said don't talk to strangers, and so I want to make sure I introduce myself properly because most of you don't know who I am, I would think. As you can hear, I'm not Norwegian. I'm in fact American, but I grew up in Florida and moved here to Norway, which tells you a little something about my mental state when you leave Florida and then you move to Norway. Now, that was many, many years ago, but when I moved here in '99 and then started looking for work after graduating at BI, a university in Oslo, and that's when I hit the wall. I had no idea how difficult it was going to be to find a job, even with a degree here in Oslo. It was really challenging, and I figure you might be able to relate to some of the obstacles that I faced. I only had a couple years work experience at the time. I was certainly an outsider, right? Foreigners, we can all relate to that. I had very poor Norwegian language skills, and that hasn't changed, in fact. That is still the case. My kids, when they were in the first week of first grade, they surpassed me in Norwegian language skills, which is pretty embarrassing when you are their parents. The other thing, I had no network being new here. I had no specialization of any kind. It was in the midst of a recession. At that time, the tech bubble had burst, just like the oil and gas bubble has burst. So it was a depressing time to be looking for work. Of course, in all my ignorance, I wanted to work in the industry that was shrinking, which was really dumb, but that's what I wanted to do. And I was unemployed for at least 8 months. So I had this gap on my resume that I had to explain that I found really challenging to address when I was talking to recruiters or managers. And lastly, but not least, when I spoke to a recruiter, he let me know that my profile, they had a word for it. He says, Ian, we call your profile a potato. And I said, a potato? And he says, yeah, because you're a generalist. You don't stand out like a potato at dinner. It's a filler. And nothing on your resume is memorable, sort of like a potato dish at dinner. It's just there and it's there to fill you up. And so I went home to my girlfriend, I'm like, guess what? And she thought I got the job that day. I was like, no, I'm a potato as well. So we just added that to the list of obstacles that I was facing. So I imagine most of you can relate to some of these challenges in your own job search. I've been there as well, and it's really frustrating when you go about doing what I think is a lot of things wrong, because I did the same kind of job hunting as everyone else. In other words, when I talked to my fellow job seekers, we were all doing the exact same thing, and it seemed like only the Norwegians were getting any headway and getting any success. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? It's got to be my profile. And that's when I looked at what I was doing for the last 8 months. There were 3 things that really stood out. Firstly, it was my method and not my profile that was the problem. In other words, most of you will think that it's your name, your lack of degree, your lack of language skills, fill in the blank, your lack of experience, you're too old, too young, whatever it is, it's a profile problem that is ultimately holding you back. But yet we spend very little time thinking about alternative ways to job hunt so that we avoid the competition and avoid the obstacles that are created by those profile weaknesses that we all have. Right? Mine has always been a language issue. For others, it can be something entirely different. We all have issues or weaknesses with our profile. The only time we're ever going to have the perfect profile is when we retire. That's when everything will look perfect on our resume. But until then, we're always going to have a weakness. And so when we can't compete against others in the same field, we've got to change the field of play and have a different game using a different method. And that's what I'm going to explain here today. The second thing is that my resume was holding me back more than it was helping me. So in other words, my work experience didn't relate to what I wanted to do going forward. In fact, that's why I went back to school, was to start on a different path. And so every time I presented a resume, people thought I wanted to continue down the same path that I had been on before, which wasn't the case. So I realized I was sharing a story that I didn't want to continue. So why should I be sharing that story anymore? So I needed to develop something other than a resume to change that profile about me. And then lastly is online job hunting has the absolute lowest placement rate of all job hunting strategies. So if you spend most of your time online, you probably have already felt this. On average, when I study this, there's between 4 and 5% is the global average in terms of success on online job boards. I think for us here in Norway, it's less than that. That's to say, if you send in 100 applications, you should get job offers on average from 5 companies. It doesn't mean you'll like those jobs, but you should on average get at least 5 offers. And I imagine that this group can probably say, that's too high even for us. So how do we take these discoveries and really make a change in your job search, one that will get you in the door speaking to hiring managers without even using your resume, without having a network? So that's what I want to share with you, and that's the gist of today's presentation. It's built around what I call the 3 secrets. And when I discovered these and started to apply them, that's when everything shifted in my job search, in my career, and in my life. So now's when you want to have a pen and paper ready, because I'm going to cover these 3 secrets here as we've got them listed. The first one here is how to fill your calendar with interviews without even looking for a job, which sounds very counterintuitive, but I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Secondly, I'm going to cover how to land the perfect job, not just any job that you can get on a website, but the job that really uses your skills without filling in a resume or an application. I know it sounds completely unrealistic, but I'll show you how I've done it 3 times in my career. And secret number 3 is how to easily discover unadvertised jobs here in Norway without even having a network. All right, so hopefully I've got your interest at this point. And what I'm going to do now is drop into each one of these secrets and explain to you the method in which I use to accomplish each one of these secrets. All right? So here we go. Let's jump right into secret number 1. How to fill a calendar with interviews without even looking for a job. All right, so how do we do that? Well, we probably all spend a ton of time behind a computer searching on job boards, company websites. It's the typical thing, right? We can all do it with our bunny slippers on, sitting at home, which makes it really easy to do. But what that does is invite a lot of competition, and that's what's really tough for us when we have some kind of issue with our profile. Now, if I would ask how much time do you spend currently in interviews versus job hunting behind a computer, you probably spend more time behind a computer than in interviews, right? So let's just think that, okay, let's say 80–90% of the time sitting behind a computer, that's kind of like the average. And yet we want to spend 80–90% of the time sitting in interviews, because that's really where we become more than just a resume, more than an application. We get to demonstrate our value and our personality to the company. But how could we flip the equation here? So instead of getting stuck behind this computer on the left, how could we spend more time speaking to hiring managers, right? Skip the application process and jump right into meetings with managers. Wouldn't that be nice to skip all that online work at frustration and jump right into meetings with managers? Well, in order to do that, there's 2 breakthroughs that you really have to understand and apply in order to make that happen. So let me explain what those 2 breakthroughs are. And chances are you've probably already realized one, but you haven't taken action on it. So the first thing here is that there's 2 job markets. And it's like this in every country in the world. There are 2 job markets. What's very clear here is that this country has in fact studied this second job market, which I call the unadvertised job market. It's the number of jobs that are given out through personal and professional networks. So if you read this article here, if you understand the Norwegian, it says 6 of 10 jobs are never published online, which makes it particularly difficult for us foreigners who arrive and are looking for jobs, and 60% of the job market isn't available to us because we don't have any contacts. So then we're left going online looking on job boards, which is the most competitive part of the job market, and we don't succeed. And that's what this article was about. That for us foreigners in particular, or even if you're a Norwegian moving to a new city, you can experience this. But the idea here is that there are so many jobs being given out through networks. How do we succeed when we don't have one? Well, I was recently working with the CEO of AS3, which is an outplacement company. They also do some career coaching in Oslo, as well as I was in a meeting with Right Management last week. They feel that the number is closer to 70–75% of the job market. Now, that just makes it more scary, in my opinion. So when there's these 2 job markets, we need to think consciously about how we are going to approach that unadvertised job market, even though we don't have a network, because that's where the sweetest jobs are. That's where the jobs are being found without any competition. And we need to grab them before they get published, so that way we don't have to compete against a dozen or 2 dozen or 100 other people for the job, that it's ours for the taking. So let's just picture what these job markets look like by looking at a simple diagram of an iceberg. So on the top, we have the advertised job market, right? This will be job boards like fin.no, you've got NOV, job fairs, company websites, and then you've got social media, which I bundled LinkedIn and Facebook in at this moment. These are the typical places that companies publish jobs. If any of you have ever been in a position to hire in the past, publishing a job is one of the biggest headaches that you can have. Not only do you have to, is it a process to write the job description and publish it, but then you're supposed to deal with all the resumes and calls that come in. You would much rather take a shortcut and hire someone you know versus going through that process if you can. And that's why this unadvertised job market is so big. And that's what makes it particularly special for us, is that if we can tap into it, we can find the jobs before they are advertised, before there is competition. So let me ask you this. Let's have a little bit of fun here. For those of you who are on the live call, you can participate in this poll. For those of you who are on the recording, you wonder, what in the world is he doing? Because you don't see this on the recording, I found out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the screen on you in just a moment here. I'm going to ask you a question. Here's the question. Where do you spend your time when it comes to job hunting? Now, I want to grab your answer, but before you do it in the question box, watch what happens here on the screen. I'm going to do a little magic here in just a moment. Let's see if this works. Boom. And here. You should now see a poll on your screen. For those of you who are on the live webinar now, if you'll answer the question here of where is it that you spend the most time job hunting, just pick what answer you think best relates to where you put the most time in your job hunt. Put a little box there or check mark it, and then hit submit. I won't see your individual answers. No one else will. But what we're going to find out here is I'm going to share the results of the collective group on today's webinar. And that way you can see not only where you stand, but also where your competition is. Where is it your competition is participating? So let's see if we can't get it. We're over 70% now. I'd love to give it to 80%. Gives me a chance to see who's on Facebook tonight. All right, we're almost there. I'm going to close it down in just a couple of seconds. Make sure to just answer it, choose one answer, and then hit the submit button. All right, super. We're at 90%. That's good enough for me. I'm going to close the poll now, and then I'm going to share the results. Interesting. All right, so we've got networking. 6% of you are spending time, most of your time in face-to-face meetings, and the rest of you, so we've got 94% of you have an online job hunting strategy. So if we go back to that iceberg, 94% of you are fighting for a position at the top of that iceberg, right? And you're not just competing against yourselves, you also got Norwegians and others who are participating there as well. So it's highly competitive when you are competing at that top of the iceberg, right? All right, let me drop you guys out of that result. That was real interesting to see. I'm going to hide the results, and then we should come back to the presentation. So the question then is, if you want to tap into that lower part of the iceberg, you know, what you don't see below the waterline, how do you do it? And this, for me, was the biggest breakthrough in my job hunt, because I had no network when I moved here. But I realized that if I was going to be successful, I had to figure out how to tap into that unadvertised job market. After 9 months of hitting the wall, you kind of realize you're not going to succeed at that point. So the biggest thing here was that I changed my ask. How many of you have ever asked someone here in Norway for a job or a lead to a job, right? We all have at some point. You let people know that you're looking for a job, and you ask them to keep their eyes and ears open, right? Well, when you ask someone for a job, you put them in a position of risk, because most of the people you ask do not know what you're like as an employee. So for instance, if I asked you, I'm just going to pick someone's name, or Daniel, if you're on the call, I see. Daniel, if I called you and I said, look, I'm looking for a job, could you refer me into someone? Could you help me find a job? Daniel, you have no idea what I'm like as an employee. And at best, I bet you'd say something like, well, Ian, send me your resume and I'll look it over and I'll give you a call if I hear of anything. But do you think Daniel's ever going to call me back? I don't think so, not unless I have a party with free alcohol, right? That's the only time he'll ever call me back here in Norway. Daniel wouldn't do that because I put him in a position of risk. He doesn't want to risk his reputation and forward my resume to others because he doesn't know what I'm like. So asking for a job doesn't get you very far. In fact, that's one of the challenges with networking, is it surfaces that rejection, because people will just be, nah, that Norwegian, let's diskutere, we'll get back to you, that kind of stuff, and they never do. So the first thing here to tap into that unadvertised job market is to stop asking for a job. You won't get anywhere with that. So you're thinking, okay, and I'm looking for a job. That's why I'm on the webinar. Why would I stop asking for a job? Well, you can get to the same destination by asking a different question, which would give you access to that unadvertised job market. Now, the question is quite simple, and you're going to think, is it really going to work? So let me explain how this works. So instead of asking people for a job, my key to the entrance into that unadvertised job market is asking people for career advice. Asking people for career advice. Now, why would that work in getting me FaceTime with managers? If I call Daniel back and said, Daniel, I understand you've been working in pharmaceutical industry. I got a question about it. Daniel, I've got a question about your hometown, in Kristiansand. Would Daniel be willing to tell me a little bit about, give me some advice on his hometown or a previous job he's had or how he's been successful? Absolutely. And with that, you can get tremendous insight into what's happening in the companies and the industries that you're interested in. At the same time, you're getting exposure, and that's what you need to be successful in finding a job in the unadvertised job market. By going around and asking for career advice, you're getting insights and exposure, and that's what you need to find those opportunities before they get advertised. Now, you're thinking, this sounds a little bit easy. Asking for advice, are you serious, Ian? I'm on this webinar, and this is all I got to do? your biggest competitor to this process, and it'll always be your biggest competitor, sits right between your ears. It's your mindset. Because you might be desperately looking for a job right now, and you're thinking, Ian, I can't be asking for advice. I got to get me a job. But believe it or not, this is the fastest way to get into this unadvertised job market and get access to the companies and the managers that you want to speak to. When you ask for people for advice, it puts them in a position where they can help you. It is non-threatening. It's no risk involved, and it's the easiest thing to ask. Now you're thinking, well, what question should I ask, Ian? If you've got a sheet of paper, you want to write 3 things down. What, where, and how. What, where, and how. The what question is, what is it that I can use my skill strengths for? In other words, if you were like me at the time, when I just came to Norway, I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. So my big question was, oh, here's what I offer the world. What is it that I can do? So I started asking people in the industries of interest, saying, hey, what do you think I could do looking at this profile of mine? I started getting advice on that. Well, the next question was, okay, now that I know what kind of role I might fit into, where is it that these roles exist? So I started asking about companies here in Oslo, roles, specific roles that might be open, and that was the advice I was getting in my next round of meetings with managers. And the third round was the how. How does someone with my background get the job that I'm looking for? That's the most specific. So you can almost draw a funnel. At the top, you put the what. In the middle, you put the where, and then the most narrow part, the how. And when you get to the how, that could be like, my how was, how does someone like me get a job in Oslo when I don't speak Norwegian? That was my big question. And so what I ended up getting pushed to is towards American companies working in Norway. But I'll save you a lot of time. In fact, it took me 2.5 years to figure that one out. That's not the best option for me. So I couldn't speak Norwegian, but if you're a U.S. company in Norway, what you want to do is sell into Norway, right? What I wanted to do in the end was work in an environment where I could speak mostly English. So my goal became to find a Norwegian company looking to grow internationally, because that's when English becomes an advantage and not a disadvantage. So I target Norwegian headquartered companies, preferably in Oslo, who are looking to go international, and that's when your language can become an asset, as opposed to working for a company that works and focuses only in Norway. Then you've got to master Norwegian, and if you do, congratulations. I just haven't done it yet. Okay. The other thing is, I'll give you a little bit of advice, is that if you want to find the companies that are fast growing and hiring, here in Norway, 99.9% of the companies are considered small and medium-sized companies. In fact, SMB is considered less than 500 people. I would imagine most of them are less than 100 people. All right, you know, you got your Statoils or Stockcrafts. Those are the big ones. But the vast majority of employers are small. How do you find them? Well, one of the things I do is I always look for the fastest growing companies in the industry that I want to work in. So every industry will have companies that are following a trend and growing. And I found a list, there's a couple of lists that you can use to find fast growing companies here in Norway, in Oslo in particular. If you go to Fast50, F-A-S-T 50.no, Deloitte, the consulting company, ranks the fastest growing companies every year. And I think it's a list of about 100 companies. All those companies are growing at hundreds, if not thousands of percent. Those are companies that are hiring. They may not show it on their website, but when you have 1,000, I worked for a company on that list that had a 77,000% revenue growth rate. They were hiring 3 to 4 people a week. They couldn't keep up with the postings on the website. And so you would just proactively propose yourself to that company, and you get an interview like that. Just showing that kind of initiative, they loved it. So look at that list, Fast50.no. You also have the Gazelle list on Dagens Næringsliv, on dn.no, the newspaper. They also rank some of the fast-growing companies as well here in Norway. A growing company is a hiring company. And they will also highlight those small and medium-sized businesses as well. Okay, does that make sense? So that's a little bit of insight for you. Simone, it's Fast50 for 50, fast50.com. And I think it's the last time I looked at it, they do it by industry as well, so you can kind of sort based on region or industry, I forget. So Fast50, F-A-S-T 50.no. Deloitte does it for all the countries in the world that they operate in, but the Norwegian one's the one you're interested in. And then Dagens Næringsliv, which is dn.no. and they have a list called the Gazelle list where they reward fast-growing companies as well in Norway. So those are two sites that you can use to really find companies where particular foreigners can be valuable, because you can only grow so much in Norway before you have to go international. And that's when your language skills, if you don't speak Norwegian, can be an asset versus a liability for a pure Norwegian company. All right, hope that makes sense. Now, let's get back to asking for advice. So let's say you want to tap into these fast-growing companies, and that becomes your big where, right? You want to find out where are those companies in Oslo. You want to look at a specific market segment, and you start asking for advice about those companies. Nothing is better than having a target list of companies that you ask people about. The more specific your advice, the easier it is to get help and directions on where to go, right? Just like driving a car, if you say, hey, I'm looking for Oslo, they'll point you there. But if you say, I'm looking for Karl Johansgate number 4, they'll give you very specific advice. And that's what you want to do, is be really narrow in terms of, I'm looking for information on these 5 companies. Now, I started this process in thinking, okay, let me just try this, because this is what the professor said. Ian, you got to ask for advice. That's your way in to talking to managers. This is what happened. I had 0 interviews in 9 months. In 5 weeks, I landed 34 meetings with managers. On this list are partners in consulting companies, headhunters, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, account managers, project managers, engineers. I was all over the place because I would have that big what question. But look at what happened here. I only start off with these 2 people. They were my uncles. One of them on the left, Gunnar on the left over here. He owns a photo store in the mall. And on the right-hand side, Tuda owns an accounting company with a whopping 3 employees in it. Not exactly Fortune 500 execs, but it was a starting point, the only starting point I have. You can use your hairdresser, you can use your neighbor, the cashier at the Rimi. Everyone is a connection to career advice, because the questions you ask will start funneling you to the organizations that can use your help, your strengths. So I started asking for advice, and originally I'm like, I want to look into the tech industry. And so what I did is I got advice for speaking to, I got to move my screen here. Here's an investor into the tech industry. Morton here is a consulting in the tech industry and a headhunter. So although my uncle was in the Photoshop business in the mall, he's been living in Norway his whole life. He's got connections, right? They all have tight networks. And so he started introducing me to people who could be really valuable. And so that started off this incredible ride of meeting people who I would have never met otherwise. Now, the important thing here is not just the number of connections that I made and how easy it was, but what it did for my confidence. If you feel completely beat by looking for jobs online, and that's probably 94% of you based on that survey, this is an incredibly rewarding and uplifting process to finding a job. Because every time I ask for advice, I simply call, I said, for instance, Gerhard here on the left, I said, Gerhard, Gunnar told me to call you. I'm looking for some career advice about the technology industry, and he said I needed to talk to you. Gerhard took the meeting. He didn't know me, but he knew Gunnar, and he was willing to take the meeting because the relationship between him and Gunnar were so strong. And that's how I leveraged every single person here, as I just said, hey, so-and-so told me to give you a call and ask for career advice. And all of a sudden, I built this network in a matter of 5 weeks. I didn't need my own network. I just started piggybacking on the existing network of others. Does that make sense? So asking for advice becomes your key to tapping into the unadvertised job market. Now, I've been teaching this for a while. One of the students at BI about 3 years ago, his name is Venkatesh. So there was someone in the Facebook group who said, but you have a U.S. name, so that's why this works for you. Well, Venkatesh isn't exactly a Norwegian name either. And he was struggling. He hadn't gotten a single interview in 6 months. I was there to teach for the graduates of the master's program. And Venkatesh was like, all right, Ian, I'm willing to try this because in 4 weeks, my student visa runs out. I'm going to have to return home unemployed, which is not what I want to do. I want to move here, and I want to move my family here. And I said, all right, Venkatesh, we've got no other options here. So what I want you to do is grab a sheet of paper and write down every name you know of which you can ask for advice. So he grabbed that list, and I don't think it was more than like 5 names on it because it was the shortest list I've ever seen. So, excuse me, I said, Venkatesh, you just got to get started. So the next day he starts asking for advice. He plays ping pong with one of the IT managers in BI. And then he starts getting in 3 meetings later. He ends up in a executive's office in a consulting company down in Fornebu, and the guy creates the job for him right there on the spot. Venkatesh had been trying for 6 months to get in the door, couldn't get the time of day from this company, and just by simply asking for advice, leveraging the referrals, the names of the people you get, he got in the door. A guy gave him 30 minutes of time. In that 30 minutes, he's like, Venkatesh, we got to get you on the team, created budget for him, and hired him. And what's really phenomenal here is that not only is he living here, but he's now moved his wife and daughter from India to live here as well. And to think that all this happened because he simply changed his ask. He simply changed the question that he was asking when he spoke to people. And by doing that, he was able to get the help that he needed in order to land the job that he really wanted. Now, for those of you who are still in doubt that a single question can really make a difference in your own job search, my question for you would be, has the question, will you marry me, ever changed anyone's life? You bet it has. So questions can really change your life direction, and this one has had that kind of impact on my life, Venkatesh's life, and the hundreds of others who I've been teaching over the years. So make sure to ask for advice and not ask for a job. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up in the question box here and let me know if that makes sense. And then we're going to move on to question number 2. I'm going to grab a sip of water while you give me a thumbs up, a yes, a hello. It gets a bit lonely on my side, right? I'm just talking to myself. I don't get the chance to hear you. Thumbs up. All right. We've got Richard, Kate, Simone, Elena, Karam, welcome. Tush, Juliana, Chris. All right, super. What I would like to do is in the future have your pictures up here instead of Venkatesh, because I'm looking for some fresh blood to put on these slides. All right, let's move on to secret number 2. How to land the perfect job without filling in a resume or an application. I bet every one of us has spit-shined our resumes. I revised mine 63 times. I had a folder for every single version. It was ridiculous. Right? It's like polishing a Toyota. Even though you keep polishing it 63 times, it's not going to be a Rolls Royce, right? There's not much more I can do with that resume. And yet it wasn't lining me up for what I was looking for, which was the perfect job. For me, the perfect job is nothing to do with pay. It means that I'm using my talents, my natural skill strengths, so that at the end of the day, I feel fulfilled after coming home from work. That, to me, is the perfect job. Now, how do you land that when you're not using a resume? Well, that's where the breakthrough came. As I was taking these advice meetings with managers and having a blast, I was doing an average of 5 a week, which is fantastic, because that when your family and friends call you and say, how's the job search going? Instead of you hiding from that answer, you can say, you know, it's going great. I've got 5 interviews set up for next week. How are you doing this week? That's the joy of this process, because you can have that positive energy and that optimism going forward. Well, when I was in these 5 advice meetings a week, I noticed every time I pulled out my resume, the body language changed of the managers across from me. They were like, I could see that there was like a little bit of distrust happening here. And what would happen is I wasn't always landing the referrals that I was asking for at the end of each meeting. So I realized that when you walk into an advice meeting, you need to stay consistent with asking for advice. If you start asking for a job, all of a sudden they're like, okay, that's what I thought you were here for. I'm not going to trust you. And all of a sudden that risk factor goes up, and all of the walls come up, and they don't give you any referrals, and the advice you get is very shallow. In order to keep that trust where it is and build it even more, I had to create what I call the career outline. And this is an entirely different way to share the story of who I am and what I bring to my next employer. So on this little one-pager are 3 sections. The top one is my strongest skills. The second one is favorite areas of interest. And the third one is work environment preferences. So my strongest skills, favorite areas of interest, that's where the 3 circles are, and then work environment preferences. Now, the reason why this career outline is so powerful is that if you present your resume to someone, not only does it bring in distrust, but it also tells the person across from you a story that you may not want to continue on. So I rewrote the story. I spent time reflecting on what my strongest skills were. I looked at my proudest accomplishments and identified what those skills were. Then I looked at my, areas of interest. Those are areas that I knew more than most people on. And then work environment preferences, I looked at the jobs that I hated in the past and figured that the opposite of that would be the kind of job that I would like. All right, so I looked at the work environment, the kind of culture that I wanted, the management style, etc. And I just outlined it. And when I started doing that and bringing that into the advice meeting, I noticed that it built trust. Because the first question they'll ask you in these advice meetings is, so tell me about yourself. If you spend 15 minutes talking about yourself, well, then you've just lost 15 minutes of valuable time. And these advice meetings aren't about you. They're about tapping into the insights of the person across from you. So you need to answer that question within a minute. And nothing is better than pulling out this career outline and saying, here, I've done a little reflection on myself, and these are the kind of things that I'll bring to my future employer. And that's why this thing, it subtly sells. Very quietly, it shares who it is that you are, what you bring to that next employer. It saves time, so you don't have to spend 15 minutes explaining who you are. I don't know if it's the 3 circles, but they seem to love this one page. I've been told that this is like having your interview notes typed up in advance of the interview, because these are the things that they interview on because they don't show up on your resume. Right? You'll have results on your resume, but if I was hiring you, I would want to know, what are you really good at? What skills do you bring, so that if I have a job that uses those skills every day, I know you're going to love this job. Well, I outline those skills very clearly with 1 sentences, bullet points. Then I tell them the interest that I have. So if I can get those interests in the job, I know I'm going to be happy. And the work environment, they always want to know, are you going to fit in? That's why they're interviewing you as well. Are you going to fit in this company? So I just tell them up front, this is what I'm looking for. Well, one of the things I've learned, for instance, is I prefer to work in small and medium-sized companies. I can't stand large companies. I have worked in companies that have been acquired. Here in Norway, I was acquired by Microsoft one round, and I was acquired by another company called Cisco, both technology companies based in the U.S. And they're just not for me. There's a lot of reasons why I don't, but I would always write in my work environment preferences for a Norwegian-based small company growing internationally. That would be my work environment preference. Excuse me, I just had to grab a drink of water. The last thing here is it helps me get referrals, all right? So that brings us to this next secret. So does this make sense? Secret number 2, how you use the career outline to change the story around you. You're looking for some more thumbs up, yeses, and then we'll move on to secret number 3. Let me know if that makes sense. Excuse me. All right. Maria says, yes. All right. I got a smiley face. Yes, it does. Kate, Julie. All right. Thumbs up, Elena. Richard. Sure thing. Makes sense. Miles. All right. Super. Interesting idea. Thank you, Juliana. It does work. It takes a little bit of time. Drafting one of these career outlines takes about as much time as creating a new resume from scratch. When I create my own, it takes about 2 to 3 hours of time to create one of these, because every word counts when it's only 1 page. And I want to put a lot of thought into it, because the more specific and detailed you are in this career outline, the better insight and direction you will get when you ask a manager for help, right? So that makes sense. The more specific you are when you pull over and ask for directions about where you want to go, the faster you're going to get there. And that's what this career outline helps me do. All right, so secret number 3 is how to easily discover unadvertised jobs when you don't have a network. I personally am not a big fan of networking. We got 6% of the people who do that, and I think it's fantastic if you have that kind of ability to network. I think I associate it with being a bit salesy, maybe rejection as well, pushing your resume under people's noses. So by asking for advice, I look at it as sort of networking 2.0. It's a lot more friendly, because I have no problem, unlike many other men, pulling over and asking for directions. And so I feel like this is a simple way, it's a very humble way to get access to people, by simply saying, I'm looking for advice, and if you don't know the answer, could you point me in the direction of someone who could answer this? And it's really simple. Now, when you don't have your own network, and let's say you're starting off with your hairdresser tomorrow, right? That's not personally a place I have been to in many years, but let's say you were going hypothetically to a hairdresser. Think how many people they know and talk to. And in order to get access to their network, you need a referral blueprint. In other words, a consistent way to get referrals. And that leads to this next breakthrough, and in fact, it probably should be 2. The 2 breakthroughs to getting access to their network. The first one here is related to trust. when you ask for an advice meeting, people's antennas are up, right? They've never met you before. It's not very often that they take an advice meeting for someone looking for help in their career. So they're like, is this guy serious? Is she going to ask me for a job? What's going on here? Everything you do in this process needs to be consistent with asking for advice. You need to have that learning mindset, and it needs to reflect on the phone call when you call the individual. It needs to be on the invitation you send them that confirms the time. Maybe you include a few questions that you intend to ask them so that way they can prepare and think about that mentally. Everything you do is consistent with asking for advice. The next thing you do is at the end of each advice meeting, you look for what we call in Norwegian knagger, and those are the little coat hooks on the side of the wall. The knagger are the questions and comments that the manager you're talking to brings up and offers you insight on. You know, Ian, have you ever thought about going to this company over here? Have you researched this company? Have you spoken to Bjorn at that company? And they'll give you these little insights during those 30 minutes, and you'll be writing those down as fast as possible. But maybe there's 3 or 4 that you really get excited about and you want to pursue. That's the ones you ask for referrals on. You mentioned, company X. Do you happen to know someone over there? Well, chances are they know someone. They wouldn't have brought it up if they didn't know anything about that company. So they'll either point you to someone at that company or someone near that company. And always ask for at least 2 referrals. When you do that, it's golden, because that way, if someone doesn't want to give a referral, hey, that happens. But majority of people do, and sometimes you land up with a whole lot more than just 2. Like this woman here, Merete, she was just graduating out of a school here in Oslo called Emergence. She's got a really diverse background in design and project management, and she did not know what she wanted to do with her career, even though she'd spent her entire life in school, just like the rest of us, right? So she used these advice meetings to discover what it is that she could use her talent for and where. She wanted to know if it was a large company or a small company that she would thrive in. So just before summer vacation, and you know how everything in Norway is in relation to a vacation, right? It's always like, you're at efterferie, and you just never know which vacation they're referring to. So she decided to start this process the week before sommerferie. Not recommended, but nevertheless, she decided to do it. She's not from Oslo, so her number of connections was limited, so she started off with some guest speakers that had come to the school. She landed 6 advice meetings in her first week of trying this. She was absolutely hooked, but completely disappointed that she now had to wait 6 weeks before starting again because of ferie. So in August, she started up again, and she called me after a couple of weeks. She says, Ian, I've now had 17 advice meetings in 3 weeks. I'm having a blast, but you know what? She says, I was in talking to an executive today, and you wouldn't believe what happened. He opened up his address book, and he gave me 9 referrals in one meeting. 9 referrals. She's like, it's overwhelming. I don't have time for this. She ended up taking a few of those meetings and then deciding which company she wanted to work for based on the advice that she'd been given. She's now working in a small design company. What's hilarious is that when she goes to industry events, she knows everyone. She's like, hey, how's it going? And her boss is like, how do you know these people? Like, yeah, well, I met them. I had some advice meetings with them. And yeah, she's just impressive. But she took this method and ran with it. And she used this to discover exactly where it is that she would thrive. Not being from Oslo, not knowing exactly what to do, and she had a really diverse background. So you can see how this is completely different than sitting behind a computer all day, looking for a job on Nav or on Finn and getting frustrated and pulling your hair out. For me, it's the only way for looking for a job. The truth is, when it comes to having hope, when you're looking for a job, it means having at least 2 alternatives at any point in time. You always have to have a plan B in job hunting. So you might do some more online job hunting now if you want, but you need to apply a second alternative, a second way of looking for jobs in order for you to be hopeful and optimistic about the future. If you only rely on one way, you might think, oh, I think I'm going to get a job offer, and you don't have a plan B and it falls through, that's when you lose hope. But if you have another alternative, you can still stay positive. So consider this. For me, I use this as my primary way of looking for a job. I've done this 3 times in Norway over the last 15 years, and it's worked the same every single time. I've never had a problem. I've done over 100 of these advice meetings because I've made 3 major career shifts of my own. And I've never had anyone say no. I've been in some amazing offices. The CIO of Nushkidro, I asked for 30 minutes of his time using this technique. He gave me an hour. The chief purchasing officer at Nushka School gave me 2 hours of his time. It was ridiculous. But once you get to that level, they start to refer you to people that they know at that level, and that's the joy of this when you get there. It's taken me some time, but now it's you know, I've kind of mastered this process, and I just love teaching other people how to use it as well. So that way you can get in the door and don't have to sit behind the computer. All right, so let's just do a quick recap now of what we've covered. The first thing here, the 3 secrets: how to fill a calendar with interviews without asking for a job. There was 2 breakthroughs there. The first one was that there's 2 job markets, and we are now focusing on the unadvertised job market, which is around 2/3 to 3/4 of the entire Norwegian job market. The way we tap into that is by asking for advice and not asking for a job. Secret number 2 is around how to land the perfect job without filling in a resume or an application, and we do that by changing the story we present using the 1-page career outline. And secret number 3 is how to easily discover unadvertised jobs without a network. First is building trust, and it means being consistent with asking for advice and being patient with looking for a job. By asking for advice, you get the insight and the exposure you need to uncover those jobs that are relevant for you, and that way you can find them before they get advertised. The second thing there is asking for referrals at the end of each meeting by looking at those coat hooks, those open-ended questions and comments that were brought up during the advice meeting. All right, so we have covered the 3 secrets here, the methodology at a level of detail that I think gives you an idea of how you can move forward. What I want to do now is make sure to have time for some questions and answers. Now I'm going to open up the question box again. If you've got questions about this process or about your situation, I won't use your last names because just in case you are employed and you don't want your employer is also on the call, I don't want to call you out, so I just use your first name. But feel free to drop in any question that you have there, and we're going to address it here on the Q&A section. I'm also, because there's been a lot of requests for this webinar, I'm going to upload it to my YouTube channel where I post twice a week job hunting tips. So if you like this, the type of methodology, this alternative way of thinking of job hunting, you can type this address in. It's going to redirect you to a YouTube channel called Job Hunting Secrets, and you can subscribe there. I'll be releasing 2 videos every single week, and that's something you can just use as a free resource to help you out. So I'm also going to upload this webinar to that channel as well, so you can find it there afterwards, and I'll repost it in the Facebook group. Okay, so let's see if we've got any questions here. I'm happy to answer what comes up. Let's see here. Let's see, Ryan, you have a question, and I'm not sure it was timed with probably something I said a few minutes ago. Your question was, sorry, how can you react here? Can you just give me a little bit of context of when you asked that question, and I'll be happy to answer that for you, okay? All right, here's a question. Hoyson, what if they tell us, what do you mean by advice? What do you want me to tell you? So again, the 3 areas that most advice questions are built around what, where, and how. What is it that you can use your skill strengths for? Where is it that you can use them? And how does someone with your background get the job that you want? Those are the kind of the 3 levels of questions that are generally asked in an advice meeting. Okay, the what, where, and the how are those questions that you should use. All right, let's see here. Who should you approach for career advice? Megan, your question is very valid. When you first start off, chances are you may not know someone in the industry that you want to work in. So you've got to start off like I did, talking to people who you know. And again, if you draw a funnel on a sheet of paper and you look at the top of that funnel, your contacts that you have today will likely be at that top. They're going to be friends of yours, maybe not working anywhere near where you want to work. But what happens is that when you ask them targeted questions, you're going to get the answer of, I'm not sure, but I think you should go here. Sort of like if I asked you for directions and you weren't sure where the address was in Oslo, but you said, it's in that direction. I think you should go down that way. And they'll point you to people who can then answer questions based on the type of advice you're looking for. So when I asked my uncle in the photo store, I said, I'm looking for advice. I think I want to work in the tech industry, even though it's the one that's in the crapper right now. I think that's where I want to work. He's like, well, I don't know anything about tech. I can hardly get the photo machine to work here. So he says, why don't you speak to someone I know who does work there? And it was a consultant in the IT industry. It was a friend of his. And he says, talk to him. I have no idea what you're asking. So that's how I got referrals. And so as you ask questions, you'll be walking down that funnel from a very wide group of friends to a more narrow group that are more related to what it is that you want to do. All right, Abby's got a question here. What's the best way to contact someone to ask for an advice meeting? The key to landing, and this is how I've landed over 100 and not ever gotten a no, is using a referral name when you call. So in other words, let's say, Abby, I was calling you, and I'd just say, okay, Ryan told me to give you a call, and he's someone you know, he's a good friend, and that's why he recommended I speak to you. You would take the call and you would take the meeting, not because you like me or you want to help me necessarily. It's because one of your friends told me that I should call you, and you feel loyal to take it. And you aren't leveraging the strength of an existing relationship, a relationship that you don't have. So when you call someone, what's really key here is up front, you do not introduce yourself. You do not introduce yourself when you make the call. I know it sounds like against what your grandmother or your mother told you when you make a call. You don't say, hi, this is Abby. I'd like to speak to so-and-so, or is this so-and-so? Instead, you say, hi, Ryan gave me your name. This is Ian Jenkins. I'm calling about career advice. And what will happen is that when you initially say, hey, this person gave me your name, you immediately connect. Okay, this is not a sales call. This is something different, and they need to listen. But if you say, hi, Abby, this is Abby, I'm looking to have a career advice meeting with you, they'll be like, who's Abby, and how soon can I get off the phone? This is going to be a sales call in the end. So leverage the individual's name who you got that referral from to every ounce. If they give you any resistance, you just come back and say, oh, but Ryan told me that you'd be so valuable to speak to. You're at the top of the industry. I'll be willing to wait another week if that's what it takes to have a meeting with you. It works every single time. Everyone, you're just leveraging existing relationships, and people will take the meeting, all right? So that's my lesson learned there to help you out. Okay, let's see, Ryan, it's about thumbs up, etc. Okay, I guess I answered your question then. Let's see here. Do you think it's easy to have such a network in Norway? Because I think the people is not social. Get them drunk first. No, I'm just kidding. Magna, the question here is, yes, it is challenging. Networks here in Norway are very tight. Norwegians don't move a lot, and so they keep the same friendships from the time they were conceived to the time that they would die. And it makes it difficult for us foreigners to break into those relationships. So what we do is we use the referrals to quickly get into those groups and move through them in order to get our answers. I don't have time to build relationships over years when I'm looking for a job. I need access quick. And the way I do that is ask for advice and leverage people's names to get those referrals. Let's see, Ryan, can't see it at all when you asked us. Okay, all right, I think we're back on. Are there any tips on how to get in the door at companies when changing a career? Yeah, my tip is not to use your resume. So your resume is going to keep you locked in. Let's just say you've been an engineer in oil and gas. If you go out and promote that, it might work if you're trying to get into the railroads, what is it called, Jernbaneverket, or into construction. But if you're looking to make some kind of significant change, you can't use your resume because people will be locked into what you did in the past and won't see what you can do in the future. That's why the career outline will help paint a different picture, a different story that can be useful for you to make that career transition. Because if you don't tell them anything more about yourself, you say, hey, this is what I offer my next employer, then they won't know that you've done exactly this and that in the previous role, and they won't limit you to the industry that you came from. So that would be my biggest advice. That's how I've switched as well, looking at different careers, is by using the career outline. Okay, oh, you actually did, Richard, you've got here. I want to be a web developer but still have lots to learn. Is there a way to go out getting interns or lower level jobs? Excuse me, let me just grab a drink of water here. Richard, I don't, something that first came to mind here, and it actually came up in a discussion in the Facebook group for the New to Norway group, is that if you find that you just cannot find anything here in Norway, take a moment to think about what skills you might be able to offer someone via freelancing. And if you want to know if your skills are in demand, go to sites like Upwork, Upwork, Freelancer, and Guru. Those are 3 very popular sites. So Upwork, Freelancer, and Guru, where you can find out what kind of demand there is for skills out there in the market. For instance, when I work, I do a lot of uploading to YouTube. I use a guy in Serbia that I found in Upwork. I paid him to optimize my videos and place them up there and do all sorts of magic to get them up onto YouTube properly. And so I create the videos here in my house, in my studio, and then I send it down to him. He does all sorts of work to it for an hour and then puts it up there. Now, for him, if he didn't use freelancing, he'd be limited to his hometown for a job on YouTube videos, which I'm sure is pretty limited. So if you're interested in being a web developer, look for opportunities like that where you're not limited by the Norwegian market to use or build your skills, where you might be able to work with a team, an agency, do some freelancing work, offer to do some projects for free in order to get some experience. If you wanted to look in Norway, there's a startup environment. You've got Mesh, and you've got I think it's called the International Startup Hub. It's just behind the castle by Slottet. They were probably, there's tons of little startups that are always looking for free help. So if you just want to get experience and build a portfolio, that's never a problem. So hopefully that gives you some ideas here on what to do. All right, what questions are the best to ask in a conversation? Again, those are back to the what, where, and how. Those give you an idea of the 3 big areas that you want to ask. And then, of course, you'll ask sub-questions or that are really relevant to where you want to go. But stick to the what, where, how framework, and you'll be in good shape. Let's see here. What's in it for the ones offering for advice? Culturally, I feel obligated to thank them in some way or another for people who helped me. Very good point. So when you finish these advice meetings, send them a thank you note. Thank them for their time. I send that immediately. It's handwritten, and I send it that exact day. The other thing I do is in the meetings, I ask them, how can I help you in any way? How can I help you be more successful? How can I help you grow your business? It sounds like things are is there anything I can do to assist? So at the end of that meeting, that'll really throw off a Norwegian. I mean, it's like really, that's like a slap in the face when you ask to help them. They're like, what? So just do it that way. Return the favor and say, look, you've been really helpful the last 30 minutes. I appreciate it. Is there anything I can do to assist in your business, to help you out with your business, or make a connection? Let me know. I'll be happy to do that. And then send them that thank you note afterwards. All right, let's see. How long should an advice meeting be? I aim for 30 minutes. If you do a coffee meeting, it'll be 15 or 20. If you grab them at 11 o'clock and do lunch, then it'll be a 30-minute meeting. I'm always very aware of the time, and when it comes time for that 30 minutes and it's up, I make note of it, even if it's mid-conversation. I'll be like, Bjorn, I noticed that we've come to the time limit here. You've got really good insight, and I'd love it if we could just finish this topic here before I leave. And then if they give the thumbs up, then we continue. But I'm always respectful of the time, and it just shows professionalism. But 30 minutes is what I generally aim for. All right, Maria, let's see what we've got here. I've approached someone, not friend, completely unknown to me regarding a job in a company that I want to work for. Already with my CV in hand, not much has happened. How can I follow this up now with your advice approach at this time, or should I leave it altogether? Okay, never leave a job opportunity. You'll always miss the opportunities that you don't, approach. So you definitely want to keep pursuing it. I had a job in Norway that I had to call the manager 7 times. She didn't answer the phone over 2 weeks, 7 times before I got in the door. So persistence, persistence, persistence. In this case, because you've already handed in their resume, I would hold off on things like their career outline or even asking for advice, because there's an open position and that's what you're competing for. But keep pushing for them every day. Don't make them feel bad for not answering or not responding. Just say, I realize you're probably busy. I'm just trying to reach you to get a couple of questions answered around the role. I'll try to give you a call back tomorrow. And you just keep calling them every single day. Maybe send an email once in a while. One of the biggest things I've seen some of the people I work with in the U.S. do is that they they send small video clips in the email so that they get a video message. The person on the other side gets a video message, and what you do is you upload it to YouTube. You can watch the view count, and that way you know that that person's seen your video. Now, on that video, you might be introducing yourself, just doing a little selfie cam. You might be standing with a flip chart behind you. Maybe you want to share 2 or 3 ideas in 1 or 2 minutes. But the thing is that when you send a video, right, you do a video image, and when they click on that image in the email, it opens up into the YouTube video. It's something different. It grabs people's attention, shows that you're taking initiative, you put some thought into this, and it stands out, and it's a great way to introduce yourself. So you might consider that, Maria, if you're interested. All right, Chris, let's see here. Oh, super. He's had an interesting epiphany around one of the challenges I've been facing. I think it's going to help me make some progress from where I'm stuck right now. Super, Chris. Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that it was of help to you. That's good news. That'll make my evening. All right, Daniel, let's see. Do you ever come back to people for advice for a second time? I assume goals change during the process, and the important thing is just to get started. So things will change as I guess you go along, for sure. In fact, you really should keep that growing ecosystem of contacts warm by updating them about where you are in your job search. I was looking for a job in this avenue, and I had some great meetings, and I realized I'm going in this direction. And then you might call them back and say, one of the things you said became more relevant now than before. Do you mind if I just spend 2 minutes asking you a little bit more about that? So for sure, keep them warm, keep them updated. If they give you referrals, update them on what you've done with those referrals. Everyone wants to know that you've taken them seriously and you've followed up, and that's a great thing. You can go back to them and certainly contact them. Let's see what we've got. Can I approach the company directly by sending the resume to them? I don't encourage that. You can send a resume directly to someone, write an unsolicited resume. It has about, on average, around a 10% success rate when you do that. If I was going to do something unsolicited, what I would do is I would research the company deeply. LinkedIn, Google, website, news channels, really understand what's happening in that company. And then I would figure out who my hiring manager would likely be, depending on what role you're interested in. And then I would send them a proposal. I wouldn't send them a resume, a business proposal, a one-page proposal outlining what it is that you would do for that company. And if you want, you can include a video. If you can't get everything on one page, have them click on the video in the PDF, which will then drop out to a video of you explaining the rest of your idea and what you do. And that would look much more professional than sending in a resume that's unsolicited. So that's one way for you to stand out. All right, let's see, Maximus, what do we got? Good evening, what do you think of alumni networks? Is it a good way to contact referrals? Absolutely. Use every avenue that you have. If you've got an alumni network that's active here in the city, for sure. The nice thing about alumni networks is that you have an instant connection to someone that you don't have if you just walk up to them, right? If you say, hey, we went to the same school, all of a sudden that barrier breaks down and you can at least have some form of interest together, and it makes it easier to get a conversation started. Let's see, Maria, I don't know anyone who would know him. Okay, well then one of the things you can do is you can go into LinkedIn, and if you search their name, you can find out how many connections you have between you, and then you can figure out the shortest route between you. That might help you to figure out how to get that introduction. Let me just grab a quick drink of water here. How to justify a somewhat long period of 2 years without a job? Well, one of the things you'd want to do is hopefully you can highlight some work that you've been doing, even as a parent, if you've been volunteering, to show that you have not been completely inactive and that hopefully you are still fresh in regards to your competence and knowledge in that industry that you want to work in. That becomes the emphasis in that 2 years, to show that you have not been idle. So that would be how I would address that. Obviously, if you're using a career outline, they won't know about that 2-year period. But if you do use a resume, I just say, look, I address the biggest weakness up front in those kind of discussions. So say, as you notice here, I was I was not working for 2 years, but during that time, I did this, I did that, and I grew my skills in regards to this. Boom, you've addressed their concern before it even had a chance to grow in their minds. All right, Richard, let's see. Lots to think about. Have started freelancing, so this is all good advice. All right, super. Well done. Chris, pleasure. Yes, I'll be looking forward to hearing from you. I'm going to want to reframing strategy over the next 2 days for my 2 advice. Excellent. Super. Thumbs up, Chris. Thanks for joining. Juliana, good luck. Your kids need feeding. Hopefully mine are asleep by now. I hope my wife put them to bed. Let's see here. Would love to work to go door to door to companies and ask the manager to have a 10-minute coffee break with you. So you kind of force them. Okay, I tried the door-to-door thing. And here in Norway, that I found to be really challenging. You can certainly give it a shot, and if it works with your personality style, give it a shot and see what happens. The way you get the coffee meetings is through referrals. That's what consistently works. So if you can work it through, door-to-door, all the more power to you, Tima. But if not, then I would start off with just using your network and then building it that way if you find that you're not getting as many coffee meetings as you want. All right, son, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for the compliment. Let's see, do you plan on offering any meetup events, maybe to help others network in each other way? That's a great idea. I haven't put any thought into that, Richard, but I'll note it, and it'll certainly be something that we can consider afterwards. Holly, we've got a question here. Hi, Ian. I'm always worried to call and speak English. Feel like it might make people nervous or switch off. Do you ask if it's okay to speak English? I speak English on all my calls. Sometimes I'll ask them if it's okay to speak English, but I never hesitate. Usually what I do, I just speak slower, and then after I say, let's say I was calling you Holly, and I'll say, Maria told me to give you a call. I usually use first and last name. All right, Maria Jenkins told me to give you a call. Pause. Now, when you spoke in English and then suddenly use someone else's name that they know, let them think about it for a moment, digest it, and now they know something's coming in English. It'll work. All right, we've got thank you. Thanks a lot for your time and sharing. When you look at places like fast50.no, would you email or call them by trying to get a meeting? Richard, what I would do is I'd look to see if you can get access to them via your network, start using advice meetings, targeting those companies. And then when you get there, be prepared to present a proposal as opposed to a resume. People want to know how you're going to help them achieve their goals. And if you can show that you put that work up front into how you're going to do it, they'll create the role for you. And those are always the best jobs, are the ones that are created for you, not necessarily the ones that you have to fill that are posted on the job board. I think being proactive is by far the best way to approach. All right, Shaheen, I apologize for that. Let's see, how can I find fast-growing companies on DN or Fast50? That's just looking at the website, right? You just got to go to fast50.no. They have a list every year they publish on Fast50 of the companies that have grown the most, and you can download that list and then do your research based on that. But both of those sites have fast-growing companies. All right, Kate, thank you. Very insightful. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining. English is a beautiful language and challenging, yes. All right, appreciate it. All right, it looks like we've covered most of the questions here, and I think we're a little bit over time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post this video up on the YouTube channel, and you'll see it here if you go ahead and type in the jobhuntingsecrets.com/YT for YouTube, and that'll drop you into the channel. If you want to subscribe, that way you'll get a heads up when this video shows up there, and you'll get a heads up when any other videos I post show up there as well. I'll be posting one tomorrow afternoon when that's done as well. So you feel free to do that if you want more free information. In the meantime, I want to say, thank you to all of you for joining tonight. I hope you found some value in this. As we say in Norway, tusen takk and lykke til. I wish you all the best in your job search, and I look forward to following the progress of you who want to contribute on the Facebook conversation after I post the video. Thanks again for today, and wish you all the best. This ends the webinar, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.